Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about what is Kriya Yoga. So Kriya Yoga is a system of practices that lead one to have a deep meditative experience. Kriya Yoga was founded by Charan Lahiri, also known as Lahiri Baba or Lahiri Mahashai, who was born in West Bengal in 1828. He was a Brahmin, his family was Brahmin, so Hindu lineage. And he, as a young man, he was a very bright person. He was well educated. He was a great swimmer. He started his career in working in the railroad, the Bengal-Nagpur rail line. And in 1868, he was transferred to a place called Raniket. And it is there that he met his guru. Basically, he was hiking in the hills, and he came across a sadhu, a holy man. And through subsequent interactions, he realized that this sadhu, who he called Babaji, was his guru from past lifetimes. And so for a few days, he was doing some intensive sadhana and remembering his past meditative experiences. And after a few days, Lahiri conferred his desire to Babaji that he live a life of a renunciant, that he just continue to practice full-time his yoga sadhana, his yoga practice. And Babaji said, no, sorry, this is not to be. You need to live the life of a householder and to teach this yoga sadhana that I have shared with you, Kriya Yoga. And so when Lahiri returned back to the world after his time in the mountains with Babaji, there was a marked change to him. People noticed right off the bat, something was different. And so he had this yoga sadhana and he had this connection to his deep inner yogic wisdom. And he started to teach Kriya Yoga. What Babaji had told him is that this particular practice, this yoga sadhana, this Kriya Yoga sadhana practice is designed for householders. And what that means is people who have worldly lives, who are busy. This differs from people who are in a monastery setting, who have a lot of time for doing spiritual practices, meditation, and so on. So Kriya Yoga was designed specifically for people with worldly lives, to allow them to have a deep spiritual connection through their Kriya Yoga sadhana. And so Lahiri started to teach this particular practice to students. So why is Kriya Yoga so effective? And Kriya Yoga is so effective because it uses a practice called pranayama. Prana means life force, and yama means control or restraint. And typically pranayama in terms of yoga is as a form of intentional breathing, a way of directing the inner life force with breath. And in hatha yoga, there's lots of different kinds of breathing. And some of them are very good for doing yoga poses, yoga asanas, allow you to hold those positions and so on. But Kriya Yoga has a particular pranayama techniques, which we call Kriya Pranayama, which is a very effective practice for starting to induce a meditative state. And many people who practice meditation just following the breath, a kind of mindfulness meditation, will get into meditation, but it will take them a relatively long period of time. But when you do Kriya Pranayama, you get there very quickly. You start to get signs that you're going into a meditative state. So from a modern perspective at Modern Kriya, because we're informed by a neurophysiological approach and understanding of how the brain and the body works, the nervous system and so on, recognize that Kriya Yoga allows one to get into a meditative state very quickly because it leverages the body's parasympathetic nervous system. So in the body, we have the central nervous system, which includes the sympathetic nervous system, which helps to activate us, to allow us to respond to all sorts of dangers or stresses or activities in the world. And we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which would be considered as the rest and digest system. The thing about the parasympathetic nervous system is that it's the one that allows us to recuperate, to get into a lower idle state, to start to go within. And this is really what meditation is about, is starting to have that internalization happening so that you can get into a meditative state. You can start to meditate and contemplate And so Kriya Yoga is very effective because it uses that body's parasympathetic nervous system. And as a result, you find yourself going into meditation very quickly. In general, about 5 minutes or less. Whereas if you're following the breath kind of meditation, you're likely distracted, your body's in too high an idle to get into a meditative state because your breath is too quick, your heart rate is going and so on, and you're not able to go internal, right? It takes quite a long time to do it that way, whereas Kriya Yoga allows you to do it very quickly. So when Lahiri Baba started teaching Kriya Yoga around 1868, there were many different types of students. And Lahiri Baba was a Hindu Brahmin, but he did not discriminate against students from a variety of different backgrounds. So he had students that were from different castes, from different religions and so on, and they all learned from him. And so it was a very potent practice to allow them to have their spiritual unfolding within, regardless of their, religious inclination. And so it was really seen as a means to have a direct experience of that spiritual nature, of one's divine nature, if you will. From Lahiri Baba, there were a number of different key students that established lineages. Lahiri Baba's preeminent disciple, his most gifted student, was a fellow named Panchanan Bhattacharya. And so Panchananji continued the teachings of Kriya Yoga, the full 7 chapters or initiations of Kriya Yoga that were taught by Lahiri Baba. Panchanan continued teaching those to subsequent students. And that lineage, that Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage, is the lineage that I am part of and which I teach. So we teach the original Kriya, the original 7 chapters of Kriya as taught by Lahiri Baba. There have been other Kriya Yoga schools that learned partial elements of those 7 chapters. And some took the Kriya Yoga in different directions. There was a particular individual, the most famous Kriya Yogi of all, one may say, was Yogananda, sometimes called Paramahansa Yogananda or Paramahansa Yogananda. You may recognize him from his famous autobiography of a yogi. So he established a particular lineage, and he was a monk, right? He was a Hindu monk, and so his perspective brings in aspects of his religious teachings in other areas into the Kriya Yoga, and establishes it more as a religious path. And his organization, Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda Satsang Society, is very much along the lines of teaching his perspective on Kriya. So Yogananda only had the first 3 of the chapters of Kriya Yoga as taught by Lahiri Baba, and one of them he embellished a additional, what he calls initiation. So, and as well, his lineage has made some changes to Kriya that have stripped out bits that were essential at the time that Lahiri Baba taught it. And so the Kriya Yoga in Self-Realization Fellowship is one that has been tampered with to some degree. So Kriya Yoga is normally taught through a Gurum Parapara process, which means that it goes from the teacher through a oral teaching to the student. And then the student learns, the student gets feedback from the teacher and so on, and develops their practice. Kriya Yoga was never set up to be learned through writing. And there are some schools like Yogananda's school where basically everything was done as a correspondence course, including Kriya Yoga, which is very difficult to learn, not from another person. So that's why there aren't a lot of books that are written about Kriya Yoga, because it's very much about passing on an oral tradition from teacher to student. And this is essential from my perspective because the student having feedback from the teacher, learning this practice means that they can develop skills in their Kriya Yoga sadhana and that they start to get results in meditation. Whereas if one is only reading printed material, you have no ability to discern as a student whether or not the practice is working. But if you talk to somebody, the teacher, you will very easily start to understand if you're doing it correctly. Are you getting the requisite feedback? Are there things that you need to change to make your practice better? And so this is the way that I teach Kriya Yoga. It's in an oral tradition, and I work one-on-one with students so that I can help them develop in their practice. Although there are some Kriya Yoga schools that are more formal in terms of worshiping particular gurus and so on, this is not really a process that Lahiri Baba did during his lifetime. He had his own sadhana. His students had their own sadhana, their own spiritual practice. And what he said time and time again when people would ask him religious questions is that he would really direct them back to their own practice, to learn through their own experience. Because no amount of spiritual theorizing will allow you to have an experience. You need to go through particular practices that allow the experiences to unfold and the realizations as well to unfold from there. So there consequently aren't very many books about Kriya Yoga. Lahiri Baba did teach from a perspective of the Bhagavad Gita in terms of the war of Kurukshetra, and Kurukshetra is from the Mahabharata, is a allegory for the inner battle between ignorance and wisdom. And so he talked from that perspective, and he would expound his insights into how the Bhagavad Gita connected with his own Kriya Yoga sadhana to his students. And some of his students actually wrote those things down. Panchananji wrote some of those things down. And so there are commentaries from Lahiri Baba about his interpretation of certain Gita passages as it relates to Kriya Yoga. So if you are interested in learning Kriya Yoga, I would highly suggest that you learn it from a reputable source that includes the original Kriya as taught by Lahiri Baba. That's what we do in this lineage of Panchanambhacharya. We preserve those original practices. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.